Boone has very correctly predicted that the show starting exactly at 9:00 means that once again I am alone here. This is Philosophy of the People, Stefan Bertram, and it should be with Ben Burgess. But Ben Burgess has been very busy, basically since the resumption of how's it been? Maybe 6 weeks or so. But in that time, I've been doing this alone, and kind of in a sequel to last week's discussion of Tolkien and Spengler and the reactionary history that is portrayed in Lord of the Rings and in the works of Spengler, and how that relates to our present moment, and how, while often inaccurate for the time they were written, the works of Spengler and Tolkien can seem especially relevant in the present day. Obviously, my camera, which was perfectly fine every moment before the second I hit the go live button, is now being very annoying. I will make myself small. The connection here is between the fantasy series The Wheel of Time and Nietzsche's concept of the eternal return, and how this relates to a certain idea of historical conservatism, a lack of kind of revolutionary history, and kind of a great man theory of history, where history is not decided by the masses, but by certain special individuals. After Tolkien, after The Lord of the Rings, basically a whole new genre was properly born. There were obviously previously works of fantasy before Tolkien, but Tolkien was completely and utterly genre defining. And after Tolkien published, lots of people didn't just publish fantasy, but they published what were basically reconstructions of The Lord of the Rings, tales that very much followed the structure of The Lord of the Rings, but were distinct in various ways. In the 21st century, deconstructions of The Lord of the Rings are far more common. But as in terms of you're like, oh, fantasy is when you reconstruct Tolkien, so we're going to deconstruct it and instead do something that's radically different. Or we're going to take initially what seems to be the same stories that Tolkien's telling and kind of trick you and fuel you and take it apart and there's horrible twists and so on and so on. So for instance, like a Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire can be taken as a deconstruction of The Lord of the Rings. But one of the last great reconstructions of The Lord of the Rings was The Wheel of Time. The first few books, especially, were very Lord of the Rings in their form, though in later books it evolved into a political drama, prefiguring this new direction of fantasy. For instance, that was published, that is present in A Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, though largely Wheel of Time started maybe 5 to 10 years earlier, but they have been contemporaries in their publication. The Wheel of Time doesn't have the reactionary account of history that we see in Tolkien, that we see in Lord of the Rings, but instead has a conservative end of history kind of ideal. I will reflect on this within the context of Nietzsche's eternal return. Nietzsche's eternal return being the idea that history, that the world, our lives, repeat over and over and over again. And this is generally taken, at least by me, in Nietzsche, not to be a real account of how the metaphysics of our world work, but rather to be an account of like a challenge. This is kind of a psychological challenge for us to endure, to ask the question of whether we can endure our lives repeating over and over and over and over again. And this is a challenge which is explicitly part of the metaphysics of The Lord of the Rings. To go back to Tolkien's reactionary history, I argued that Tolkien has a very Spenglerian, reactionary kind of history, with an explicit inversion of the Marxist model of progress. In Marxism, we have these sages of history where the mode of production becomes more productive, we enter into more and more productive eras. And while that won't necessarily benefit the common people of any era, it's progressive in the sense that industries progress, and it's progressive in the sense that we're eventually, all these modes of productions prefigure an emergence into socialism and communism, where the working people will benefit and will, in fact, abolish themselves as working people to reach something beyond that. I forgot to finish this slide. Tolkien's idea of history is based on continual mutation and decline. Everything's getting smaller, weaker, less impressive. One where the desire for societies to reach out and affect the world invariably leads to their decline, no matter how noble they are. And one where the Faustian drive, the drive towards progress, is the worst of all things. The villain, the grand villain of the Lord of the Rings, Sauron, is a kind of primordial spirit of industry and creation and smithing and making. That's why he creates the rings. And similarly, Sauron's fall to evil is represented in him beginning an orcish industrial revolution in the Westlands. Oh, there are the rest of the words. The conservative end of history of the Wheel of Time. The kind of bywords of the Lord of the Rings, or of the Wheel of Time, are the Wheel of Time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is forgotten when the age that birthed it comes again. In the Wheel of Time, we're locked into this cyclic world history, where events repeat over and over again across such an immense time scale that once these events come around, all myth of them has entirely faded away. And this is not just something which is present in the Wheel of Time, but it's quite present in lots of different contemporary fantasy works. Normally, the fantasy work is like the actual story that we see is located somewhere near the bottom of this cycle, or not normally right at the bottom. As we'll get into later, the bottom of this cycle is normally an immense, crushing kind of apocalypse where everything is reset back to zero. So the count is obviously anti-communist, is not fitting in any way with Marxism, but I would suggest that both it and Nietzsche, more than just being anti-Marxist or anti-communist, are fundamentally conservative. What is the appeal of cyclic history in a literary manner? In what manner does cyclic history serve to help a story along? To answer this, we ought to return to what is appealing about Lord of the Rings' cyclic declines. It allows for this great, shocking breadth of history. It allows there to be these ancient ruins without having an advanced civilization which exists around them. Yeah. That you can have these ruins which are greater than anything that everyone has. You know, we enjoy the Parthenon, and it impresses us, the Parthenon in Greece and Athens. But we could build the Parthenon. We could rebuild the Parthenon. We don't do it because it's seen as like a culturally false thing. We feel like if we rebuild the Parthenon, we would somehow be insulting its history and so on. But the people in Lord of the Rings could not reconstruct these ancient memorials. Yes, Wheel of Time is very, at least, I don't particularly think Robert Jordan, the author of Wheel of Time, was deep into Buddhism or whatever, but it's clearly influenced to the degree to which there is this take-up of these ideas in Western philosophy by these Buddhist kind of Eastern ideals. The pure cyclic approach allows for this depth of history that we have in the Lord of the Rings, an ancient wonder without having to go along with the constant demutation of society. Things merely rise and fall, but because all mortal things erode away, only the most recent eras are evident. So you can have things, ancient wonders that the people of this era can't make, but because we have a cyclic instead of a declining history, towards the end of the series, for instance, you can have the people progressing to a point where they can instead do these sort of things. Demutation is when something becomes smaller. True apocalypse. What appears also more frequently in later cyclic works, later fantasy works which use the cyclic model of history, is true apocalypse. The most similar thing to true apocalypse in Lord of the Rings is the sinking of Numenor, but this was not 1,000 years of ash and smoke. Instead, in Lord of the Rings, we have, instead of the gradual decline of Lord of the Rings, which does have its sharp rise of heroic moments within the decline, like, for instance, when the charge of the Rohirrim happens towards the end of the third book, towards the end of the third film. This is spoken about in the book as like a return to the glories of the men of the First Age, but it's only for like half an hour, and then we're back to declining and becoming pathetic, and King Theoden dies, and so on and so on. What the cyclic form allows is immense disaster, as strong recoveries are also permitted. You can't really have within a declining demutation kind of account of history, as you see in Lord of the Rings, immense apocalypses. Because once that happens, you're very reluctant. It's very hard to fit in with that model a recovery, because it doesn't fit within this gradual declining system if you have an incredibly great and powerful revival after a massive crushing defeat. The world of the Wheel of Time has faced many near ends, from the folly of men and the work of the Dark One. We see a third age, and it's the third age in the Wheel of Time as it is the third age in the Lord of the Rings that we see our narrative center itself. We see a third age in the Wheel of Time which is diminished much compared to its prior glory, but we know, unlike Lord of the Rings, that things are going to get better. How do the cycles of the Wheel of Time work? There are 10 or so ages, but most of them we know nothing about. The first age was either our era or the 10th age of the previous cycle was our age. And by that I mean our history, the world we live in, like the Lord of the Rings, which is meant to be in our ancient past. Yeah, I've tried to solve it and it didn't work, so I'm just kind of embarrassed about it. Just as in the Lord of the Rings, the first age was either just as soon. Obviously, you should have said that, but you completely threw me off there. As our history, our world, our present moment is the future of the Lord of the Rings. Our present moment is both the history and the future of the Wheel of Time, because it's obviously the cyclic system. In either the first age or the second age, magic was rediscovered, and this led to a utopian society in the second age. But humanity is never satisfied, and in their Faustian search for a magic both men and women could use, they doomed themselves. They found this combined gender-neutral source of magic, but it turned out to be the very essence of the devil. Fascinating, exactly what this may imply for the kind of gendered relations in the Wheel of Time. Gendered relations in the Wheel of Time being something which could have a whole episode dedicated to them. And the Dark One being let out of prison doesn't, and to be clear, when the Dark One is let out of prison by this act, this doesn't then immediately lead to a massive, enormous war that comes later. Rather, what the the devil does is lead to like a moral rot of the society. It's destruction via moral rot. And this is obviously very interesting and being very much like not a materialist account of history in the world, where rather than a civilization falling because of inherent contradictions in its mode of production or something like this, it falls because people become bad guys because the evil man made them. When trying to solve this problem, the wizards again break on gender lines. The men go off to seal the devil away, but he corrupts the male half of magic, and this brings forth an apocalypse that nearly drives humanity to extinction because all the male wizards go mad and destroy the world. This sets up the drama of the books where a man with magic must save the world. The Faustian drive is less suspicious in this third age, where the heroes invent the canon, and the main hero, Randolph Thor, seeks to create an academy to leave something worthwhile behind after his death, including the construction of a steam engine. It's important to note that while they seal the devil away at the end of the 14-book cycle. Spoilers, sorry. This will only last as long as until the ages cycle around again. In some way, the doom seems assured, as the devil only has to win once. The devil wins once, and there's no one to seal him away, and surely he won't become so weakened as to let them out again. Ben says, from your description, it is material. The dark one materially changes people's nature. It's just not economic and a loose metaphor of a non-material reason people choose to emulate bad guy. I mean, sure, but materialism in Marxism, and I think this is a very important point, and one that leads to a lot of confusion, at least in orthodox, straightforward Marxism from Marx, and not even from someone like Engels. Materialism doesn't refer to metaphysical materialism, doesn't refer to physicalism, but refers to the primacy of economic matters, of economic relations, of economic structure and production as driving history. Sure, but this is something that people did because they'd been morally rotted away. There's no reason to believe that there have not already been infinite cycles. If placing a number even makes sense in such a context. If the wheel has already been spinning, then it's always been spinning, you know. There's always been these cycles already happened an infinite number of times. There's not really any reason to conceptualize any particular number. So we either have this irrefutable archetypal hero who never fails, because to be clear, in each era, the hero, the dragon, returns. But he seems to never ever fail, or if he ever does fail, it's never ever a total one. It's impossible for him to fail totally, or he already would have, and history would have ended with a victory for the devil. More even than Tolkien, ontological good and evil is something which is very evident in the Wheel of Time. In the Wheel of Time, things are even more Manchean than the Lord of the Rings. In the sense that evil is not just the absence of good or something which comes from the corrupted and sinful hearts of men or corrupted entities which aren't men or something, generally, you know, coming out of a grasping nature of humanity or whatever. So in Lord of the Rings, you have the great villain Morgoth in the early ages, but he is not a primordial force. He's just a fallen angel. Sauron is also an objectively evil force, though he also fell, and there seems to be moments where he's been redeemed. In the Wheel of Time, the Dark One is primordial. The devil is primordial. He's not of the Creator's make, but existed from the first moment of time. He is an inherent part of the world. The Dark One is not fallen, is not a product of God. He is just evil. I think more key even than that is that evil, this evil of the Dark One, seems to be essential for the metaphysics of the Wheel of Time. Crucially, in his final confrontation with Rand, the Dark One showed a world without him. And this world is a dull, happy one, where there is no light behind anyone's eyes. Rand goes to see one of his wives. An entertaining point for anyone who hasn't read the series. Rand, the hero, goes to see one of his wives in this dream, in this imagination of this world without the Dark One. And he finds like a simpering, empty person who doesn't really seem concerned with anything at all. It's not just that primarily evil exists, but it's necessary. The Wheel of Time understands it for the normal functioning of humanity. So Rand must simply allow the wheel to keep spinning, to let people suffer eternally in this unending loop over and over and over again. Rand has to be the man who rises to Nietzsche's ultimate challenge, not just for himself, but for everyone. And he just doesn't have to make this choice once, but over and over again in slightly different circumstances. Yes, certainly there were definitely very evil people in the Age of Legends, and that's kind of the contrast between the Dark One being sealed away, though it's not entirely clear what that means or how exactly that works, and the Dark One being destroyed. Nietzsche wrote, "The greatest weight. What if someday or night a demon was to steal after you, and in your loneliness say to you, this life as you now live it and have lived it, you'll have to live it once more and innumerable times more. There will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have returned to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself, the eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you within it, a speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or how well disposed would you have to be to yourself and to life to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate internal confirmation and seal?" Only feel a little bit at the end there. And this is from The Wheel of Time. "Why do we live again?" Lewis Theron asked suddenly, his voice crisp and distinct. This is Lewis Theron, a voice of the previous age, the previous hero in Rand's head. "Yes, Rand," said pleading. "Tell me, why?" "Why? Maybe," Lewis Theron said, shockingly lucid, not a hint of madness to him. He spoke softly, reverently. "Why? Could it be? Maybe it's so that we can have a second chance." Rand froze. The wind blew against him, but it could not be moved by them. The power hesitated inside him, like a headsman's axe, held quivering above the criminal's neck. "You may not have a choice in which duties are given to you," came his father's voice, just a memory in his mind. "But you can choose why you fulfill them. Why, Rand? Why do you go to battle? What is the point? Why?" All was still, even with the tempest, the wind, the crash of thunder, all was still. Why? Rand thought with wonder. Because each time we live, we get to love again. That was the answer. It all swept over him. Lives lived, mistakes made, love changing everything. He saw the entire world in his mind's eyes, lit by the glow in his hand. Remembered lives, hundreds of them, thousands of them, stretching to infinity. Remembered love and peace and joy and hope. Within that moment, suddenly, something amazing occurred to him. If I live again, then she might as well. That's why he fought. That's why he lived again. And that was the answer to Tam's question. I fight because last time I failed. I fight because I want to fix what I did wrong. I want to do it right this time. Why do we have to be so brave to endure Nietzsche's challenge? I think these two pieces of text are very kind of well accompanied to each other and kind of bring out what's kind of actually challenging about Nietzsche's eternal return. Because we have to grapple with committing every mistake, have to go through every suffering an immense amount of times. Of course, we get every good thing too, but it becomes clear here that Nietzsche is a pessimist who wishes he could be an optimist, and is speaking to people who are like him in this way. Nietzsche subtitles, which one is it? I think it's Echo Homo, or maybe not. A book for all of none, a book for all and for none, where Nietzsche's point being his books are for those that have a disposition towards them, for those who could benefit from them, for those who could get something out of them. Nietzsche is explicitly not a universalist. And to those that have suffered a great deal in their lives, Nietzsche's challenge is a true challenge. And Rand, from The Wheel of Time, suffered immensely. But he also loved and was loved far more than Nietzsche ever did. And he reaches his apotheosis at the end of the books. He reaches his kind of point of peace and reckoning with himself, not through any kind of Nietzschean ascendance, but rather becoming this Christ-like figure who disconnects himself more and more from the world instead of the Nietzschean solution of feeling yourself more and more within the world. Yes, Benzer is correct that it was thus spoke Zarathustra, which is for all and for none. Who does Nietzsche think could accept the eternal return? One who lacks regrets, who aims exactly towards the life that they want. The point of it is to challenge us to ask, if this is not a life we can tolerate doing over an infinite number of times, if the life we presently lead, we couldn't imagine ourselves doing it over and over again, why are we willing to do it once? But to return to the earlier discussion, I don't think this is a particularly fearful challenge unless you're already miserable. I mean, it could be just fundamentally psychologically, I'm missing something, or being kind of like overly rational in this weird philosophical way. But it seems if I'm content enough to live my life over and over again, if I'm content enough to live the life as I have once, then the idea of living it over and over again shouldn't be particularly disturbing to me. Ultimately, it doesn't really feel like it could matter at all, because as long as I don't know it, then the difference between a life lived over and over and over again and one lived once doesn't really seem to be different at all. What is notable about the Wheel of Time, and especially the case of Randall IV, is he does know. He does have the memories of his past life, and they torture him. They drive him almost to madness. He's haunted by his previous spin through the wheel, while at the same time gets the knowledge he needs from this ancient ghost in his head. The idea of Amor, fati, the idea that there is fate and that you should love your fate, is represented very much also in the Wheel of Time. One of the key phrases of the Wheel of Time is the wheel weaves as the wheel wills, which is to say, the circumstances that people live in, that men live within, are not determined ultimately by men, but by this kind of abstract metaphysical entity of the wheel. It is the wheel who decides which soul goes in what body, and so on and so on. The main characters of the tale of the Wheel of Time are Taveran, special persons picked out by the system to have the events of the world bend around them. There's metaphysical intervention from on high to confirm and institute the great man theory of history. While this is a good Nietzschean faith, it's fantastic for Nietzsche would have so much fun in the world of the Wheel of Time. He'd be like, Taveran, they're the Übermensch, blah, blah, blah. But being these kind of almost these higher men who are confirmed by destiny and fate to have the world revolve around them, this fate is generally misliked by the boys who are granted these powers because of the classic kind of reluctant hero in the Tolkien model. It's normally represented as in like a spinning wheel, like a needle, like for making clothes, like a sewing needle wheel. And so the metaphor in that sense is not mixed, but it's like the wheel is weaving like the tapestry of time and so on. what is problematic about this account of history? You know, when I was writing this slide, I was like, well, people have really ruined like the word problematic, because it's completely the appropriate word to use in the circumstances to say what's problematic about this kind of history. But you really don't want to, because it sounds cringe these days. The problem here is there's no way out. There's no end of history. Reaching utopia, as the people do in the Second Age, does not mean remaining in utopia. It means forgetting that the devil was ever locked away and letting him out over and over again. The people of the Third Age and the people of the Fourth Age would, of course, never go to the ball where the Dark One is sealed and drill away, hoping to get some power. But an age passes, and age passes, and age passes, and age passes, and suddenly everyone forgets that the devil was hidden away. And all they remember, all they know, is that there's great power hidden within this place. And so they dig out again, and the same cycle happens over and over again. The Wheel of Time is also one of the most intensely chosen one based stories, where it's not just there is one chosen one. So there's the whole thing of prophecy. There's an immense amount of prophecy in the Wheel of Time, and that kind of tells you exactly what's going to happen right at the very end of the book, from the very start. But it's not just this prophecy. It's not just that Rand's the chosen one, but also that Matt and Perrin, the two of the male characters, are these Tavaran that I mentioned, who have the world literally bend around them. They have kind of plot armor, whatever you'd like to call it, literally instituted into the metaphysics of the world. The idea that the eternal return, or the spinning of the wheel, could be put to an end by the actual existent movement of the people is about as far from the metaphysics of this world as it could be. It's probably even more decisively anti-communist and anti-Marxist than the reactionary version of history that we see in Spengler and Tolkien. Because in Spengler and Tolkien, this reactionary account, at least history is going somewhere. At least we're getting somewhere. That place might be bad, but of course we can see that because Tolkien reviews the industrial progress as regressive, we can kind of just invert his values in an unchained sense and say that actually where Tolkien sees decline in this Faustian drive towards progress, we can just simply say we can see progress instead. And so in Jem says, why are you ruining the Wheel of Time for me? Well, I hope not. And I suppose this is the end of my slide. So if people have questions and so on, feel free. But I don't think this is really my best video anywhere near it. But I would like to say here, I am an enormous fan of the Wheel of Time. It's my favorite fantasy series, my favorite book series. I love the TV show, even when it's been very ropey, even though now it's good. But as often is the case, beautiful works of literature have within them embedded metaphysics which are not appealing in any way. And this is often, there's a clear break where metaphysics that serve a fantasy story, serve literature, you would hate them to be true in the real world, right? Because you aren't the main character. The Tavaran system in the Wheel of Time, which provides a system by which the world literally metaphysically revolves around the heroes, is a great system. It really sorts out a lot of problems in fantasy and similar stories where it's not clear why the heroes keep being the center of events. Why are they always there? Why are they always relevant in all these stories and all these moments and so on? Well, the Wheel of Time has an actual answer, which is that it's just it's metaphysically necessary that they are. But at the same time, that creates like such a closed, doomed world, as well as like the cyclic history of the Wheel of Time creates this very appealing system of this cycle of the great immense pressure of history. But you'd hate to live in such a world because you would know, even if you're living in utopia, it can't last. And you might be able to live hundreds and hundreds of years, but if you live long enough, your world will fall in some way. The more aware you are of the systems of the Wheel of Time, the more you know that your age, your time is a doomed one. I'm really sorry for that clicking of my laptop, which is generally it's not nearly as audible as it sounds to me, but as Soon has mentioned, it clearly is picking up. So I'm sorry for that. I just really need to find generally a better audio solution. Need to get various things fixed. And obviously it becomes a much more pressing issue when I'm by myself. Previously, like with the clicking of the laptop or various little weird things, I could just compensate by muting and shutting up. But obviously with me being alone here, I don't really know when Ben is going to return. Yeah, but I want to be better. I think from the fact that it only picks up a bit, I think my noise filtering is generally very good because for me it's loud as fuck. And I was like, when it first started happening, I was like, oh my god, it must be deafening to everyone, but it's not. It's just kind of there, I think. Yeah, I think it was doing the exact same thing last week, so I don't know if the sound is any different this week or if it's just Soon just noticed it this week. But there is distinctly this kind of clicking. It's the right-sided fan on my laptop has failed and basically continually tries to like start up, but it's unable to do so. So then just tries starting up again about 10 seconds later. I also have a very expensive, very large microphone, which has also failed. So yes, if I could definitely turn down my gain and so on and keep the microphone. But also, I mean, if I had this working, then yes, what I could do was just place the microphone and say here, far away from where this weird clicking, hissing, crackling sound is, and all would be well. But the issue is that this doesn't work. This lovely, expensive microphone is broken. But yes, this week I just need to be brave and decisive and go sort it out. Though the thing is, I've got no idea what I'm even going to do next week if Ben isn't here, or if I might. Oh. Me trying to physically demonstrate something just led to complete and total logistical disasters. But yeah, I don't know if I'm even going to be doing anything next week because creating these slideshows, which I don't even think are particularly good, is taking up far too much of my week. I don't have any clear ideas for next week, so maybe next week we'll just skip it unless Ben comes back and heroically rescues us. But yes, I mean, I would like to do an episode on gender in the Wheel of Time. But I don't think I should do like fantasy like 3 weeks in a row. And I do something more current affair-y, based on like happenings in Turkey and in Kurdistan, then it can become very hard to make that relevant to philosophy. Because it's in contrast to historical idealism, which again was not an idealism of saying that, minds are the only thing which exists, but an idea of historical idealism where it's ideals, where it's ideas which are the primary driver of history. The classic kind of high school example is to talk about like the French Revolution and suggest that kind of the idealist perspective would be that the French revolutionaries, the French Revolution happened because the ideas of liberalism were invented, and then that kind of pushed kind of capitalist social relations and economic relations into being, while the Marxist idea, the historical materialist idea, is to instead suggest that it's not the ideas that changed the world, but rather the world changed and the ideas came about kind of following the ideals. And of course, in some sense, if we're physicalists, we think ideas are physical, or at least they're very closely related to the physical. Yes, and I mean, the confusion has become much more confusing because pretty much immediately after Marx, and we see this, I think it was Engels that kind of invented it, we see dialectical materialism, which is normally actually a metaphysical account, or at least a one which stretches far out beyond like a political historical economy into various fields of study, suggesting that they're all kind of driven by some kind of dialectical material relationship. But yes, that is going to be all for this week, friends. I really do need to sort out my whole audio situation. But yes, I will talk to you all next week, maybe, unless I don't. Bye.